Welcome to the first video of our third section, integrating web service calls and JSON parsing. In this particular video, we're going to talk about making a web service call, which is the very essential element of any of the iOS app. Now, unless it's a local game or something that you can simply interact with within your app without talking to the server, most of our app, I believe more than 90% of the app should have some kind of web service calls inside them. Okay. So this is very, very important for you as an iOS developer, not just the front end, but also how to interact with the back end. Now, for URL session, it's one of the APIs, which is NSURL session, in fact, provided by Apple for developers to interact with the HTTP as well as HTTPS protocols. And NSURL session provides the ability for us to create sessions. Now, session is nothing but something which creates a task, and then a task is used to transfer data between the server and the app. So app is your client, and the server could be any database server that you can interact with using any of the APIs. Now, for very basic requests, which we're going to cover in this course, we can simply use the URL session class provider, because if we have a shared instance of the URL session, which is a singleton session, and this object can actually be used to give you a lot of default behavior for creating these tasks that I just mentioned and doing all the data transfer. So you don't really get into more complex, wrappers around URL session. Everything you see on the internet which uses something like Alarm of Fire and everything, it actually internally uses an SURL session. Okay, so what about those wrappers or libraries? So there are a lot of third-party libraries available on Cocoa Pods, and it's up to you which one you want to use. You can manage all these libraries using a pod file, and you can decide whether to upload the libraries to your Git repository or not. So yeah, how do you decide that? You'll have to search for git ignore. Okay, so you have to look up what is git ignore, and then you're going to learn how exactly to avoid uploading of the folders to your repository. Okay, so this is something that you can do, but it's totally up to your team and the structure of your team whether you want to upload the pods or not. But in this tutorial, I'm not going to cover Cocoa Pods in detail. I'm just letting you know that yes, Cocoa Pods are there. You can use Alarm of Fire, and the easiest way to install them is using Cocoa Pods. Okay, so let me just tell you what exactly is Alarm of Fire. So we do have a Swift-based HTTP networking library for iOS, which many of the applications are using, and it's called Alarm of Fire. And it further simplifies the networking task. So obviously, when I say further simplify, it means that there is a simple way of calling web service, but using Alarm of Fire, it can be simplified further. So it's totally up to you. If you have complex, network calls, which many applications do, you can use Alarm of Fire because it will give you a lot of additional functionalities. And it is very easy to define the methods, parameters, headers, and authentication when you use a library like Alarm of Fire. Alright, so now let's jump into an Xcode demo. Let's start by creating a function called getQuarks. We're going to first create a URL. And since this URL is optional, we're going to create it using a guard statement. That's because there's no point of calling the web service if you don't have a URL. So as you can see, we have created a shared URL session instance, and then we have used the instance of the URL session shared. And then we're going to create a data task which takes the URL and a completion handler. Now you will notice that the completion handler, though, is a second argument. When we try to provide it, it's going to be converted into a trailing block. As you can see, you no longer see the argument name, you just see a trailing block. And now we're going to handle those three response objects or the completion handler objects into our handler. So you just have to give them a name and then we can use it. So an error must have a localized description, but to be able to handle this warning, we're going to just print something went wrong. We need to have an else block here because first we have to have a data and no error, and then we're going to print the error if there's any. Now, As you can see, the function that we have is actually throwing. So now we have to use a do, try, catch block. Let me show you how it works. So this particular function throws. Let's first put the arguments inside. We don't have to use any options in this case. But if you try to build the code, you will notice an error. The call can throw, but it is not marked with a try. So it tells you to mark it with try. And then you're gonna simply have to do catch. First you create a do block. And in case there's some error, we're gonna print the parsing error. So now that the task is ready, let's resume it. To quickly check it, if it works or not, we're going to put this function call in view.did.load. Let's try and run the application and see if we are able to print the response. And as you can see in the console over here, we have the response ready for you.